off your camera and we will try to remember not to call you back to put your camera back on. Thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate seeing you. So just in case you are lost in Whova, this is the complex citation working group session, and we're delighted to have you all. Thank you so much for coming. Martina, do you mind getting us going with slides?
Yep.
Some of you have had the unique opportunity of listening to me talk for hours already today, and you will just have a few more minutes of my voice, and then I am going quiet. So just happy about that. Let the experts take over. Great, thank you. So if you could navigate over to our notes document here, I'll put it back into the chat. Right here. Please make sure you add your names in so that we can keep you updated, and certainly joining the working group if you want to stay informed. We welcome everybody to join the working group. And we have some news on that. So collaborative notes, add your name, join the group. There's the web pages and our approved recommendations. We actually have a link to that. So that is the big reveal. Our recommendations have recently been approved. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Martina. I was okay. So what we'll do is this welcome, as you're in the middle of the welcome right now in the introduction to the complex citations. We'll cover what a complex citation are, I think it's an object. It is. We're going to walk through implementation use cases from the point of view of DataCite through James. The DataCite folks are having a staff retreat this week, so they are, I don't know how they conflicted with RDA, but they did. So they are busy doing that, and we're grateful for the fact that they have shared some slides with us. Physical samples. Actually, Joan, I didn't update that. You actually expanded that topic to other things. So I'll let you introduce that when it comes to you. But it's a broader look at samples and how those are cited. So I look forward to that. And then Martina, the IPCC folks have been working on implementation, and Martina will share that. And then we'll walk through what's next, which is very exciting. The intention here, now that our recommendation is improved, is closing down the working group and standing up an interest group for implementation. So we hope you all stay with us. It gets even more exciting. So here's our motivation. What in fact is a complex citation? And the idea here is the challenge behind a complex citation is making sure that all of the digital objects are that go into research outcomes or a report figure are cited for attribution and transparency. So that is a different way of saying that motivation. In that there's a number of folks that benefit from that, including those, especially if it's publicly funded data creation, that digital asset and the original funding are connected to that research. So we are targeting a moment in time for a complex citation that it supports a research finding or a particular report figure or outcomes that are such as the IPCC report, and there are other types of reports that are finding this valuable. So it addresses the fact that would you rather I keep moving? Would you like a faster cadence? Am I waxing too much poetic there, Martina? Just wondering. Okay, maybe I am. Go on. Keep it up going. This is Martina's way of saying, Shelley, you just talk too much. Or Martina was on those earlier meetings and she's had enough of my voice. Which is a beautiful way of keeping me moving. Our 3 initial use cases are documented here. We have almost 20 additional use cases right now, and that's growing across the disciplines. So the complex citation is meant to meet multidiscipline needs. And these three use cases approach the problem in three different ways. And so those characteristics do apply to a number of our use cases, not 100% of them, but a number of them. So the British Oceanographic Data Center, which, if those of you who are familiar with cruises and different ways of capturing data sets, they're being able to have determine what the granularity is of the persistent identifier that identifies the data set, knowing that researchers take subsets of that, and knowing that there's hierarchies that are complex, and how can the complex citation meet the needs of citing the actual data that went into the research. Very exciting. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, our IPCC report, and being able to give clear transparency and attribution to the researchers and the data sets that contributed to a particular figure that's impactful for decision makers. That is number two. And Ameriflex, FlexNet, in some ways, Deb Agarwal, and now as Deb has, well, she's still involved, but has moved on a little bit, and Joan have represented the very broad FluxNet towers across the US and worldwide with all of FluxNet, and what it means to actually give attribution to the folks that are managing those Flux towers for the many different research uses, and how do we actually cite the data that's actually used. So three different aspects. Next slide, please. So I think we need to take a moment, because the process of citing the data and then attribution taking place is not clear to most folks. There is murkiness within the publishing life cycle, so it's important to highlight that murkiness here. And the reason we have the workflow actors that will then need to do the implementation. So I'm going to take a moment to walk you through this. This probably can improve as we get into the interest group, for clarity. So if anybody's finding this confusing, the challenge you have will be helpful as we move into the interest group to make sure we clarify it even better. So that top green area is sort of the touch point of the data the data object creator. So the workflow actor is the creator of that digital object. So I'm going to flip back and forth between data and digital. Just know any digital object applies, but sometimes it's easier to think about one. So maybe we think about data. But if you're here for software, no problem. Think about software. Physical samples, no problem. Think about an IGSN. Okay, no problem. So you preserve that digital object, or you register the IGSN, whichever is your thing. You do that. So, and that could be 100 of these. We just have one here, but it could be, and is likely, hundreds and thousands, could be images, could be audio. The author team, which could include the creator or not, right? We don't know. The author team wants to actually use that data in their research. They do that. We don't have that identified here. And now they need to give attribution in the paper for having used the data set. And the way you do that is you include the citation to that data in the reference section. Now, they hit the wall. We'll use AGU's journals because this happens at AGU as well. They have 100 citations. We say, no, talk to the hand. We don't do that because, frankly, we're not good at it. And we don't want the reference section cluttered up and old legacy systemic issues that we are not going to solve in the short term. They could be solved in the long term, but not in the short term. And they push you, say, hey, you're going to have to put that in the supplement. You say, no, I don't. I'm going to use a complex citation. Do you have that implemented? Yes, we do, which is fictitious because this isn't a thing yet. Yes, we do. So what they're going to do is they're going to create a complex citation object. And they're going to need a tool that does that. So that's the generator for the object. These are generic terms we're using. We don't have these tools yet. So just know we're not going to give you a website to go test this out. Just imagine it in your mind. So they create it, and what they've done is every single digital object that supports that paper will go in there. And nicely, we can also include persistent identifiers for instruments, or any other contribution to, like, for instance, you could even cite the repository. The seismology folks are very interested in citing the networks. You can include all of that so the attribution can take place. That is okay. That is perfectly good. Um, you cite that object. It will be a DOI with a new type in the reference section of the paper. So you have a single citation in your reference section. And it is meant to be curated to that paper, right? Just realize that, please, that that is a moment in time. These are all the digital objects for your paper. You send it to the journal. Yay, the journal's like, I love a complex citation. It makes my life so easy. They are celebrating that you've made their life easy. Um, they publish the paper. They've accounted for in-text citations, so you actually can identify a particular data set in your text and point to the element within your complex citation, and that works beautifully, which, by the way, again, isn't a real thing yet, but it does, we have precedent with books and chapters, so we do have a way to do it as publishers. So the publisher publishes, right? We go through that back and forth. And when you publish, the act of doing so is registering a DOI, just like when you publish a data set. And there's an enormous amount of metadata that gets written and shared with in an open way to Crossref. Commonly, it's Crossref, unless you are, for peer-reviewed publication, the DOI registry agency that most, I won't say nearly all, most publishers use is Crossref. If you are publishing in Chinese, Korean, or Japanese in any of those dialects, you're commonly using a different registry agency that handles those characters better, just so you realize. There's other nuances, but if you are an expert on DOI registry and you're cringing at my description, it's a simplification, but it's accurate. Um, so that DOI registry, that publication gets registered, and the cited complex citation goes into event data, and the relationships with all the children are accounted for. So that's what Crossref does for it. It updates event data with the cited data sets, software, and all the digital objects. For those of you who are familiar with how that works, it is imperfect, but it is the current method. We also, that in a separate workflow, this is really important because if there's a bug in one, that doesn't mean there's a bug in the other and vice versa, and they can have different bugs, meaning problems. There's a workflow coming out of all the publishers' work streams that go into the indexer world, and the indexers take a look at usually the entire paper sometimes, or sometimes it's just the open metadata in order to actually index the fact that that data was related to that paper. So that is we do have one indexer that has agreed to go ahead and make the updates, ADS, who is also SciEx. Then you see this happen back with the paper when the publication has a machine actionable citation that links to those coming in from event data that we have a relationship, and then you see the index in things like ADS, like SciEx, showing the relationship between the two. So there are two different paths to doing those two different things. So knowledge graphs are on the left usually, and indexing is on the right. So think about it maybe in those two types of data ways we look at data. Onward, please. So we have some new vocabulary that we've introduced in the recommendations. I've already talked to you about the complex citation object and the recommendation CCO. And that is we haven't yet worked out all the details with DataCite, but it will be a type of DOI. It will look really similar to a collection, but the difference between a complex citation object and a collection is that in a complex citation object, the children get attribution. And in a collection, the collection gets the attribution. That's the difference. And it's an important difference. Very important. In order to identify the elements within a complex citation object, we call them linked digital objects, not to be confused with linked data objects for those of you who will work with that space. We know that that's really similar, and we highlight that in the recommendation as we just call it out for you. We don't mean a linked data object. We are talking about linked digital objects. Next slide. So this is a high-level summary of the 10 recommendations, and it's in our summarization of the document, but I think it's a quick way to walk through them. So coming in on the first one, capturing enough deal to ensure that we can, in fact, have credit, traceability, and transparency for those the cited objects, linked digital objects. We have enough machine actionable information to do that. So that is critical. If it's not machine actionable, then the downstream services from publication are not going to do what we need. That we do not, the actual object does not accrue credit, but instead it's the linked digital objects that get essentially the attribution that allows credit to take place. That's important. That these complex citation objects are stable, identifiable, version resolvable, and persistent. So they follow the rules of registry agencies for DOIs. They are in compliance. We have versioned here because we did have a discussion that, let's say you're building on research that you published about a couple, 3 years ago. You want to you've used most of the same data, so you could go back to the generator that created your complex citation object, copy it over to a new complex citation object, add, delete, and then recreate your complex citation object as a new version that then is cited in your new research. So we wanted to make sure we included version control because that made sense. That we use standardized structures. And this is really important. This phrase here for limited to PID graph levels. If you recall, and of course persistent identifiers, right? Like we wanted to say it out loud. It's kind of obvious, but you just have to say it. The 2 PID graph levels has to do, if you remember me talking about the British oceanographic use case, they have a number of levels within how they describe the data, the provenance, the relationships. And when we were trying to identify that within a complex citation object early on, there was some concern from the indexers on the concept of recursiveness, such that they really wanted it to be like the complex citation object as the top level, and then the children as the second level. That's what the 2 levels mean. And that we don't have a recursive situation where you cite something that you then have to also parse. So in shorthand, don't cite in your complex citation object another complex citation object. Instead, just include those children in your object so that there's 2 levels only. There's more to it, but that's the gist. And then the last one, that we are living in an open science world, open, accessible, and flexible to all of the various use cases, open licensing, and sufficient metadata. So, and that is what we're trying to do. And then now we'll move into the interest group on how we do it. And James, I think I'd like to invite you to talk about the approach that DataCite is thinking about. Are you?
Yeah, so apologies in advance, and thanks to DataCite for providing the slides. I'll do my best. I see Uwe's got his hand up. Are we saving that to the end, Shelley, Martina? Yeah.
Do you think we should wait to the end, or is it a quick question?
It was just a quick question about the last one. So the license of the complex citation object, so the license would just be on the metadata itself, because there's not really something inside, because each object inside should have its own its own license. So how is this meant? So it's basically CC0 like all the other data site metadata, or is there something else?
That's correct. In no
Okay.
way do I want anyone to think that we are actually copying data. We are not.
Okay.
The data remains where it is. It has its own licensing. There, you don't have to negotiate like an overall license based on the licensing of all the children because that's irrelevant. We are not aggregating a data set here. We are literally listing a bunch of citations to the children, to the, I don't mean to say children. I've just used element children and linked digital object, and I mean the same thing for all of that. It maintains its own licensing, and you don't overwrite that licensing. Yes, that good, very good point of it. Okay, great, James, off you go.
Yeah, next slide, Martina. Okay, so DataCite supports recognition for open research outputs. So you collect the data, you standardize, and you aggregate and you share. So DataCite supports Make Data Count, which is an initiative that supports to build the tools and practices necessary to enable evaluation and reward data use and impacts. So through the standardization, aggregation, and sharing, you're able to actually track how data are used and see how often it's used. You collect and openly share data usage information, so promoting the recognition of data usage and impact in research assessment. And there's a load of work that's been being done and has been done through Make Data Count. Next slide, please. So creating citations via DataCite metadata schema. So the workflows via DataCite enable the creation and collection of citations for different research outputs. The related identifier property in the DataCite metadata schema connects research outputs to other research outputs. I think this element is really powerful in the way that it links the graph element that we've talked about before, and using some of these elements to point to other linked digital objects. The example here is every related identifier has a relation type, which defines the type of relationship. For example, DOI has part of DOI-B. So you have whole or part relationships. And going back to the BODC, the British Oceanographic Data Centre example, where we have a DOI from an element of a cruise and the subsets of that, you get that sort of partial elements of data sets. A DOI is derived from DOI-B, so source relationship, and this might be where people aggregate data sets and improve them and create products. DOI-A is cited by DOI-B, and this is where you get that scholarly citation element between data sets. Next slide, please. So creating citations via the DataCite metadata schema. The following values in the relation type property are used to create citations. So this is important when you think of the complex citations and getting that impact and where things have been elements have been cited versus the relationship. So they use is cited by and cites, is referenced by and references, is supplement to and is supplemented by. So if you have a data set, the metadata of the data set includes is referenced by, is cited by, is supplement to in the metadata, and that's linked to a journal article, and or a journal article has metadata of the article includes references, cites, is supplemented by, and that goes into the data set. Journals typically have limitation on the numbers, and the complex citation object is sort of trying to help address some of those concerns as well. Next slide. So the citations registered via metadata are aggregated in event data and available via DataCite APIs and the portal DataCite Commons. So you can see the example there, where you can go and query to get the relationships of registered DOIs with DataCite. And you can have that as XMLs, but they also have JSON. So you've got flavors of schema and the links across those and how you wish to use them as well. And in here you can see sort of related identifiers, a perfect example of DOI is cited by. Next slide. So the considerations about citations for linked objects. With the DataCite schema handles connections at the DOI level, usage counts are part handled per DOI. So if a DOI is cited that contains other objects within it that also have DOIs, the citation does not propagate to the child object. And this is where the complex citations element is really powerful in trying to get those child linked digital objects and the citation through to the appropriate objects. If a relationship is established between those DOIs through the metadata, it may be possible to determine counts for the parent DOI, but this requires further separate handling. And this is where we want buy-in from the indexes and people like DataCites to help drive and implement the complex citation object. DataCites support recognition for all contributions and are interested in ways to assign usage indicators to all objects at the same time. It is important to balance this with feasibility of adoption of citation practices for non-article outputs. So we believe DataCite are on board and very much interested, and we're looking forward to sort of getting the implementation with them. And once again, thanks to the DataCite.
Thank you, James. Anybody have a question? No. I'm really excited. I mean, we've had very few conversations with DataCite. They've been watching us, participated in some of our early discussions, and I'm delighted at their support. So, Mariana-san, yes, please.
Yes, thank you very much. May I ask that in a case about the case that the well, let me see. Excuse me. Yeah. No, this is not. Whereas, yeah, I mean the so you're. Oh, I lost. You know.
Did you say it was for Martina? She's going to speak after Joan. Do you want to hold for her to do that?
All right, yeah, I will. I will check my questions again then, and let me ask her again.
And recognizing it's the middle of the night for you, so like this is difficult time of day.
And I opened the too many web pages and during the RDA, I'm sorry.
Worries.
Okay, later. Thank you.
We'll come back when Martina comes on. Okay, go ahead, Joan, please.
Okay, great. Yeah, it was great to have those slides from DataCite because I'm coming from a data repository perspective, and we, of course, are using DataCite metadata and exploring how we can better use related identifiers for our in our data sets to connect our data sets to a number of related entities, but also to support provenance tracking and citations. Now, we aren't currently using related identifiers, so we worked through some use cases, and that's what of how we want to implement this, and that's what I want to talk about today. So my name's Joan Damerow. I'm the data management services lead for the ESS Dive data repository. I'm a research scientist at Lawrence Berkeley Lab. I'm also the co-chair of the Earth Science Information Partners Physical Samples Curation Cluster. And so I want to present a little bit from both of a perspective from both of these experiences and roles on how we could support complex citations for data sets that might include things like source data and samples that we want to have provenance and citation information tracked for. So ESS Dive is the data repository for the U.S. Department of Energy's Environmental Systems Science program. So we store a really diverse data types, and they might span a variety of different natural and human ecosystems, such as watersheds, coastal systems, and cities. There's a lot of different data types that we want to be able to connect and things that are potentially existing across different data systems and publications. So we've worked through some use cases for connecting our data sets to related things across different data systems. And one of the goals here is to make the data sets more findable and reusable because they are highly connected, but also to cite things appropriately in our data sets. And again, I think it's worth considering how we could implement complex citations using or improving somewhat of our existing workflows. So I'll go over how ESS Dive plans to use data site related identifiers to connect data sets, again, to enable these to make the data more fair and to enable the functionality of sometimes of the complex citations. And as we work through our use cases and implementing this, we did find that many of our data sets are being created for, for the purpose of a specific paper, and they should actually function like a complex citation. But in our case, we want both the data set and a number of individual components potentially to be included in that complex citation, which I think we can do by including both of those things, or, all of these things into the complex citation object. So in these cases, this includes synthesis studies and other data sets that include source data published previously, and also interdisciplinary sample-based studies where we need to track sample use over different data systems, because a lot of particularly biological data systems store data at the sample level. Finally, I'll discuss some related work in the ESIP physical samples curation cluster, where we've developed guidance for authors on publishing sample-based research to make it more fair and to enable provenance tracking and credit. So we worked with our scientists in the environmental systems science projects to determine how specific data sets should be connected to related outputs, as I've mentioned. So this involves 6 different projects and about 20 data sets where we worked through and added related identifiers and connection metadata, and using DataCite metadata. And these data sets are all published in a data portal collection, ESS Dive, shown here. The link is shown. And as I mentioned, yeah, some of these, not all, but some of them should be more like a complex citation when they're cited. This is just an overview of what you already heard from James. Again, what we want to do is use DataCite related IDs and connection metadata, and this is actually really nice, even as it is currently, because once you provide these related identifiers and the relation type, DataCite Commons then can provide cross-repository data discovery, citation counts. You might have a network graph that could look something like this, but it often doesn't, because a lot of systems aren't currently reporting related identifiers. And you also see links when you're on a, for example, a data set page and DataCite Commons, you'll see links to all the related resources and the abstracts there. So that's really useful to us and to our projects. And now I just wanted to go over a couple of examples for data synthesis studies. These often are compiling data from many different sources, where again, tracking provenance of data and attribution is really important. And the example shown here on the right, this is a data set landing page, and we're currently putting this information in the related references section on ESS Dive data sets. And working on how to present these different types of related identifiers in a user-friendly way. But this is an example of a study that's integrating root characteristic data from 104 different papers, things like root biomass and root dynamics. That was where they extracted specific data from these different papers. They originally cited these sources in a supplemental table in their paper, so that was the only way that they could cite those. But we worked with them to create a synthesis data set where we will be formally citing all of these sources in the data set itself. So again, citing the source data should enable tracking the provenance of the data and formally credit all of these synthesized data sources. So it would be great if the researchers just needed to cite that data set in their paper to then propagate credit and provenance records to the original data sources for synthesis studies like this. And we're seeing more and more of these kinds of synthesis data sets in ESS Dive. Interdisciplinary sample studies are a little different. They often have related analyses and research outputs across multiple different data systems. So we worked through 9 example data sets so far where we connected data at the sample, both at the data set level and at a sample level with these individual projects. So this is just one example. We have 6 different projects that work with us on this, and I'm just showing an example on the right here of our related references section on ESS Dive. In this data set, they had 880 individual samples collected and described using standard metadata, and they were registered. They registered all of these samples for IGSN IDs, which are sample DOIs now. The samples underwent analyses at a lab, at the Environmental Molecular Sciences Laboratory, and were described in an Associated Journal article. So if all of the samples are included as related identifiers in that dataset metadata with appropriate relation types, we could then enable not only connecting this sample-based data across different systems, but also tracking provenance and credit if these were more like a complex citation, where both the data set gets credit because you're adding a lot of new data and it's a valuable product, but we also want to cite those source samples because we want to see all the places that these samples are being used because they're highly interdisciplinary, really have connected data across different systems. This is just an example of a source sample that if it's assigned a persistent identifier can be linked to a variety of different things, like it's associated with the project, a sampling site. There are a number of different analyses and then subsamples and analyses that result from those that exist in different data systems, like the Joint Genome Institute for genomics data and metabolomics data and this Environmental Molecular Sciences Laboratory. So we have this really interconnected sample-based data. So to illustrate how we could connect and track sample use, you may have a set of source material sample records that are used in a data set. The data set contains a sample metadata file that lists all of these identifiers and potentially describes them, includes all the metadata associated with those identifiers. If the samples have IGSNs or other persistent identifier, then the source material sample record could be updated as being part of the data set with a link to that data set. The data set is then cited in a journal publication. We can then use connection metadata to automatically track use of those samples in both the data sets and the journal publications and propagate links back to the source material record. So we at those source material record, we want to see all the different places those samples were used. So DataCite already tracks metrics in a similar way for data sets and samples using IGSN IDs. And we can get part of the way there if repositories collect and provide related ID metadata to DataCite. But it would be even more useful and accurate if some of these data sets function more like a complex citation, where you not only cite the data set in the paper citation, but that also includes the samples within the data set. Related to this, for the ESET physical samples cluster, we've worked for a few years now on a checklist guide for authors publishing open research using physical samples. This includes things like creating a data set with listing all of your sample persistent identifiers like IGSNs and citing that in your papers. We recently submitted revisions for an associated paper in Nature Scientific Data where we outline these use cases and illustrate needs for tracking sample provenance and citations. And it also covers additional community and infrastructure needs, one of which is complex citations. So I'll be presenting on this paper tomorrow in the RDA physical sample session. It's 3:30 p.m. Pacific time, which is where I am. And then just to summarize, we need complex citations in our repository for citing source data and samples and data sets. Again, because people are often creating data sets for a specific paper. So this is, again, to enable both provenance tracking to understand how samples and source data are used over time, I think we can do this by making sample data sets function more like complex citations when they're cited. I think that could be one application of this, of complex citations. So this would be really essential to really track how samples and certain data are used over time. But as we've covered in earlier, it does require changes in how data repositories and publishers and indexers are treating citations, and we hope that we can continue to adjust this with complex citations. And that's all I have. So we can move on to the Martina. Unless someone has a question before then.
We have one question in the chat. Shelley, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, Carlo provides us with a really like infinite loop situation, and it's certainly important for us to track, have the whatever tool we're using for generating the complex citation object to benefit the researcher, so we don't run into non-compliant formats. So Carlo, that's a great use case. So thanks for that.
Okay, I just need to find the right
So if
window
anybody
here.
has ideas like Carlo and you just have to blurt it out, please do put it in the chat. Don't assume that we know we have heard your use case. I think now is the time to, rethink through all of the different permutations. So definitely, type them up or send them along or join the IG.
The IG, which we are about to talk about later on in this session. So I don't want to share the use case so much, but share our progress. So we have implemented a pilot for the IPCC use case, and we have moved on to discuss the implementation with 2 groups. So I'd like to acknowledge the different persons and the different groups. So we have IPCC TG Data, the Task Group on Data Support for Climate Change Assessments. We have MCMAP, the REF group, Rapid Evaluation Framework. We are lucky that Jupiter is supporting us. And of course, this working group here in RDA is bringing a lot of ideas in, which are really valuable for us. So just on one slide, what the aim of the IPCC is. So complex citation is just one piece in the implementation of fair and open data practices into the IPCC report. We started in AR6, and the aim was really to enhance the transparency of all IPCC outputs. And we focused on the figure generation process, and we identified exactly the 2 aims, which also the complex citation has. We want to have the traceability of the figure generation, and at the same time, give credit to all the input data providers, and additionally also for maybe scripts or something else. The third part is not so relevant here, but of course, all the digital objects need to be long-term preserved. The experience from AR6 led to a long list of recommendations for AR7. I just want to highlight 2. One is that we want to implement the complex citation in the form that we assign complex citation objects to the figure generation bundle and reference them in every figure caption. So usually figure captions are really long, so we really need a short notation to get them into these figure captions. And the second experience which we had was that the authors were overwhelmed by our requests. So one really important lesson we learned is that we have to support them better in generating all the requested information. I have 2 slides to just set the scene in the sense of scale and what we are talking about for the pilot implementation and going forward. So we've looked into the different figures and classified them by data figures and conceptual figures. So conceptual figures not based on data. You see the conceptual figures in blue and the data figures in orange. And if you look across the 3 parts of the report by the 3 working groups, most of the figures are really based on data. And the scale is for working group 1 and 2, around 500 figures, and working group 3, a little less, 350, and the synthesis is, of course, a bit smaller. The second part I want to share is the structure. So on the one hand, we have the different reports with different handles and identifiers on it. And we also have the data. So this is the working group 1 report. We have DOIs on the full report. We have DOIs on each chapter. These are assigned by Cambridge University Press. There is an additional digital version of the report, which is hosted by IPCC. So this is a bit special. And in this digital version, we have so-called figure pages, which include all the information on figures and figure creation. And this is a typical figure. So they are usually very complex, have different frames in it, and are based on different kind of data. And I have to say, I only have information for model data. So the model data is coming from 4 different projects. And just to focus on the CMIP6 data, so that's a large model intercomparison project, we usually assign the DOIs on a model run. So these are large collections of model runs provided by the modeling groups. And for this granularity, we have 173 used for this figure. That's really an average number. It's not a high number. And in individual data sets, there are usually only few selected per model or per model run. So we have 346. We do not have DOIs. We don't cite on that granularity, but we have handles on this granularity, not on every model experiment, but for CMIP6, this is the case. Just to finalize, the code is published through the GitHub Zenodo link, and the final data, so what you see in the image, is also archived afterwards. So this was more or less the use case, what we are dealing with in practical sense, and the pilot implementation really is based on this information about model data usage in the report. And we only have archived the CMIP6 data, which I just explained. And we don't have complete information, so not from every chapter, but still for the Working Group 1 report, 107 out of the 500 we could identify to be based on CMIP6 data. And for those, we published the complex citation in Zenodo. So just to make sure, complex citation is not existent because we have some gaps, which I will explain. But we used and came up with a standardization to describe these complex citation objects based on a JSON LD. So we used the recommendation of DataCite, how to represent DataCite metadata in schema.org, and we extended it by traceability information. So if you think about the relations which were introduced, we came up with a deeper structure, so not the single level, but we have the 2 level to describe the internal relationships, like the DOI. From this DOI, 2 data sets were used. So this is the granularity, which is on the 2nd level. And we identified or came up with linked digital object types. So maybe with the example that gets clearer why we came up with that. So first of all, this was already mentioned. This is not a complex citation object because this DataCite metadata cannot identify it as such. So that's a real gap which we cannot close. We introduced that in the JSON LD by using the additional type to just have a and information in this metadata, what this object is or should be. I already introduced the standard for the CCO, which we used. So second was the LDO types. We thought that if this complex citation object contains so many different kinds of digital identifiers, we need to have a flag or a type assigned which says how to interpret this linked digital object. So we have the DOIs for the CMIP6 data where the credit should be assigned. We have other information like the data sets where we can say, well, if you want to provenance information or reproduce the figure, then you have to take that. We have some additional things like archived subsets or the image. We have the chapter as reference. So that's what we came up with. And we think that this controlled vocabulary needs to be defined at some point. And this is the last part, the references section, or in data site relations in schema.org, it's the citation part, and this is just one of the cited objects. We identified it as data catalog. So this is a DOI on one of the model experiments. We added the additional type credit to as set as controlled vocabulary. This has part different data sets. These are also from type data set. We have the name convention in CMIP, which is called data reference syntax. So this is a name identifier, so to say, which really says what the content is, more or less, if you are familiar with the controlled vocabulary of CMIP6. And it says that these are provenance information or can be used for provenance. And as said, we have a subset archived in a long-term archive. So the CMIP6 data is not staying in a long-term archive, so that we have added this information as well for one of these relation entries. Yeah, and finally, what we plan or what we have started to do for AR7 to go forward. At the start, I mentioned that we need to support the authors better. So we got in touch with tool providers to work with them so that the information we are asking for is generated by these tools. So we want to use tool frameworks or recommended for the authors so that these tools generate the figures and the so-called provenance record. So we plan to use these provenance records for gathering the information for archival, but also for complex citation. There are two reasons for not trying to implement the complex citation directly into the tools. One is you need a DOI registry, and not every tool applier or tool framework developer has a DOI registration agency. Secondly, complex citation is evolving. We don't have a standard yet. And there are also reasons that the IPCC should be the owner of the complex citation object in the end, because it's part of the publication. It's referenced in the figures, and we might have to update it. One reason is that the data might be archived a bit later, so that we have to replace a URL by a DOI. And if in the errata corrigenda phase an error is identified in a figure, then we might have to reproduce the figure or to regenerate the figure with all the implications on the data and the complex citation. So we might end up that we have to version it. So these are the two framework providers that we work with. I've mentioned the rapid evaluation framework, so that are, I think they are 3 evaluation framework providers, so tool frameworks which are used to evaluate model data. One of them was used in AR6 in at least 3 chapters, and they already have a provenance documentation W3C compliant in their core, and the others are about to use or to develop something similar based on that. And the second is the Jupyter project. The reason is Jupyter was also used by several chapters, and if we can get the similar information or ideally the same structured information from notebooks as we get from the rapid evaluation framework, we might be able to derive a provenance template for all the other chapters that might use their own tools. So that's the idea, how we go about it. So from our side, we think that complex citation is really enhancing the traceability and credit for the figures in the report. And we have identified the provenance record as the way to gather the information, not only for the complex citation, but also for other purposes. And we identified several gaps. So we need a standard for the metadata. We need some kind of a controlled vocabulary. And we need these resource type general in DataCite's metadata to identify these objects. And of course, it needs to be taken up by stakeholders, like Shelley mentioned in the beginning, how complex these different stages of data and metadata reuse is. And at some point, we need to discuss about versioning. So that's more or less all what I have to share. I'm just opening the chat. Has anyone read the chat?
Thank you, Martina. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, do we need to talk about this? Well, this is the next step, so. No, and Carlo, I'm sorry that I should have been more cautious when I was talking about the IG. It's so easy, unless you're into the governance of RDA really closely, to track the difference between the groups and how things progress. So I should have been more clear that this is the end of the working group and we'll kick off the IG momentarily. So matter of fact, that's probably the next thing we'll do, is start that up. Moriyama-san, yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, this is the right place for me to ask this question. Thank you very much. After Martina's presentation, yeah, my question was that yes, the CCO and linked data approach is really great to have the multiple citations from the collections of the data set, and it is really so problem solving in many scientific field, especially in a geophysical field, I think, as far as I understand, and in other field also. And my question is, from this collection of the data set, as a researcher, as Martina understand, you know very well, the researchers use, for instance, it's a new numerical modeling to make objective analysis to with a unique idea of his own or her own uh, to make a new improved for instance, global climate data set. And it includes originality and the creativity. That data set is based on the collection of lots of the data set, and the recognition and evaluation of this originality of the created data is beyond this the scope this complex citation idea. I mean that the complex citation scope focuses concentrate into the how the collection of the data can be correctly cited and correctly evaluated by the citation number and etc. And the evaluation of the created data from that kind of the collection of the data is a different issue here. Is this right understanding? My English makes sense?
Yes, we recognize the time that you're joining. Yeah, we really focus on bundling the data that needs to be cited and that is needed for the traceability of the data product. So we have this separated this part from the long-term preservation part. So when you start to register a complex citation object, we expect that all the objects are already referenceable. So ideally, we would like to have a DOI on the data, but we know that this is not always possible. So we allow for other options like URLs because otherwise we might not get the complete list, but end up to have part of the information in the end. So we think it's better to take an information which is less sustainable than to leave it out. Has that answered your question, or was there another one?
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I understand that. I understand that probably then my question is out of scope of this complex citation discussion here, and yeah, probably we can discuss in another other place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay.
We should discuss it because versioning and long-term preservation is a bit tricky with model data because bits and pieces get new versions. So yeah, it's worth for a longer discussion on that.
Yeah, long-term preservation and newly created data set need to be so evaluated, more recognized in a research field. And yeah, that's the another story. Yeah, here. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yep.
Adding on just a little bit to the rhetoric, we are finding we're trying to fill a particular gap on citation. We know we're not solving some of the other related issues, but I know in this work and frankly the slide that you're looking at right here, there is we are pushing some of the other issues to the forefront of conversation. So, and I think Moriyama-san, you might be alluding to some of those other challenges that now need to be addressed because we now have a way to actually cite them. Therefore, we need to clarify some of the relationships in norms and best practices. I may not have gotten everything, but that might be a piece of it.
Yes, that makes sense for me. Thank you very much. Yes.
Uwe, I think you're next. Go ahead, please.
Okay, yeah. Maybe I have missed it or not seen in the talk. Do you already have some real productive example in a paper citing complex citation object? And what would be interesting for me, how would a citation of that would look like in a paper? Because, you know, for a data set, you would have in square brackets data set because that's a type for APA. And how would it look like in a paper? Because for somebody reading the paper who is not a machine, it should also be identifiable that it's a complex citation object. And the other person should maybe not simply copy it unseen or check all those objects inside. So basically, how would you recommend to have that look like? And is this part of the recommendations you have written? I haven't checked them yet.
We did. Oh my God, Uwe. I'm teasing you. No, the recommendations are what we need to do, not how. Though,
Okay.
please do continue engaging. So, you know, as we move over to the IG,
Okay.
I have I could sketch out what I think a starting reference would look like, citation. And Kira, yeah, please please stay connected to this. Kira's associated with Cambridge Press, and are you not the publisher of the IPCC report? I think you are.
Yes, I believe we are, but that's more sort of the book side of things. I mostly work with our journals, but yeah. I think was it Martina? Did I sit down with you at Costa Rica to chat about this?
Yes.
Yes.
It's good
yeah,
that
I'll
you're still
definitely
around.
Thanks.
Yeah.
No, I'd be very interested in looking at the implementation phases. We've got a colleague who's very, very good with all the metadata stuff, who I'm sure would be very interested in how we would actually implement these things. But I think, yeah, that's where we are now, is we need to know more about how the implementation works.
Perfect.
Sorry to interrupt.
Perfect.
But
we really need something because we are also interested at Pangea to have something like that, because people are often asking for, we have hundreds of data sets and want to publish them or not publish them, refer to them in one go. And the problem is, if you talk to scientists, you have to tell them you have to write it down like that in your paper, because then it's clear. Of course, machines can read the metadata, but somebody reading the paper, and also the software like EndNote. EndNote doesn't even have a type for data set, but that's another discussion.
Yep. And as you know, there are many pieces to the puzzle. Graham pointed that out just now.
Okay.
So
I just wanted to know if you have tried that out already, and paper publisher has accepted it or whatever.
So
maybe I can clarify from the pilot implementation. So we did that after the publication of the report. So it was really something to check what we could do and how we should do it. So we came across all these little questions of, well, what is the standard? How do we make sure what this linked digital object is about and how it should be interpreted? And as you have heard, we have made the connection to our publisher, but it's really too early, and the interest group needs to find some solutions on this specific ideas. So we had a long chat at the RDA, and I wasn't aware how complex the publisher side is like in the end. So it's at some point even comparable to what we do at the data repository. So but maybe
by
we
the way,
should.
I will say that's something I find
is the correct license for the complex citation object, because it has the same shortcut. No, joke. I have another question, but maybe I let John.
Maybe Kai. Yeah, but Kai, I think Kira wanted to say something first.
Okay. I was just going to say that, yeah, it's something that I certainly didn't realize before starting working for a publisher. There's a lot of complexity in how we manage all of the details of like how the XML works, what links to what, how we distribute metadata. So yeah, definitely interested in seeing what the actual technical implementation might look like. And because I think it's not a trivial challenge. I think that the framework is great as it's being developed, but yeah, I think it's not a trivial challenge to get from here to actually building something that works to implement it.
It would be great if Kira, we would like you to be part of the pilot. Let me just offer that. Please join us.
I'll see. It'll depend on my colleagues' times and thing, but yeah, because I'm not the process/technical/XML guy. So, but yeah,
No worries.
certainly would like to hear more about it. And especially as you say, since we do publish the IPCC reports, and I do have one journal that is one of our key partner journals who's very interested in this sort of thing. So yeah.
All right, brilliant. Thank
Yeah.
you. Joan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, great to have you on board. Joan, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think this is related to the earlier question. And I just wanted to clarify that, like for our use cases that we're considering in the ESS Dive data repository, because as a data repository, we create data sets and we want them to work better for people. So we want to see if some of our data sets, like I mentioned, could function like complex citations. And that means the data set is a new thing. It's a new thing that scientists created by putting things together and by like adding some like additional data and analyses. So that itself like would be included in a complex citation. And so for some of the use cases, the citation could look similar to a data set site, like just a data set citation. But I think we do need to work through exactly what, like who the authors should be in some cases and you know, what exactly that citation should look like. But for our use cases, I'm envisioning it like similar to a data set citation, but it would function a little differently.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And we chatted a little bit about it, and I do think it will be a easy like a wrapper. Like we would create a wrapper and then everything would flow from there. So I do think that when we get into the details of that conversation, it will be a great example of how to do it. So yeah. And the RRID people are very interested in participating at this point. As well, Anita Brandrowski and the SciCrunch folks. So they are poised as well. Graham, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think he's just picking up on Joan's point, and it's a question about, you know, where do you want the credit to land? You know, do you want the credit to kind of go down to those underlying objects, or do you want it to land on that derived data set that you kind of put together as that instantiation of use?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
for us, it would be both.
Yeah, so it's one of the things we were sort of we went backwards and forth about a lot. You know, do these objects in themselves accrue any sort of credit? Because there is some effort going into creating these, but they are inherently a metadata construct as opposed to an associated data set, which, you know, if you're saying you're actually pulling together, this is a curated data set, which relates to these other things, and that's maybe a slightly different thing.
Yeah, and I talked to Shelly about this, and the solution we came up with is that the data set would be included in the complex citation object because it's a new thing, but it includes other things. So it would just, the data set itself would be in there as well as like all of the samples.
Yeah, I think that would work really well.
So it's like putting the complex citation above, and
yeah.
then you have the data set to the side, and then these other samples, and then you describe the relationship. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And that being the difference between a complex citation and a collection, which is a curated instantiation. Yeah,
it should work really nicely.
I think that IPCC use case does have that with the sort of credit and the different subsections and sections as well. Sort of shows that as the starting point to start delving into.
While you're all thinking, I do want to talk to you about what the slide that's up right now, because I think you'll find it to be related to complex citation, and larger than. So So complex citation, multidisciplinary, we want everyone to be able to use the construct. So we will continue to try to add folks into the community to make sure that we have multidisciplinary use cases. I do have the National Institute for Health, so that's in the US, government agency, being battered right now in the US government, but that being said, they're surviving. Um, uh, and they put out a challenge. And a challenge is not a grant, it's not a contract, it's a prize. And they have a third-party provider that's managing the challenge. It's freelancer, so don't let that throw you. It's official third-party provider. And they want proposals for what they're calling an S index, a data sharing index. And it's a little bit ahead of, we were talking about in complex citation, what it means to actually, when you cite the data, how do we make sure credit happens? We can't. We make sure it's possible for credit to happen. We make sure the attribution is there, and then the credit has to be done by others. So this is the next step. This is how can we guide the research community? So think H index, but not. And very nicely, I'm trying not to read the chat here. I'm going to close the chat so I don't get distracted. You guys are having a good conversation there. Please continue your conversation there. It is perfectly okay. Okay, so saying things that are out in the open. You can lead a team here, and you're welcome to do that, but you have to live in the US to be the leader of the team. So I do have a team logged in. The winner of the full prize is 500,000 US dollars. Some of that has to go for travel. There are 2 phases. So phase 1 is due June 2nd of this year. Phase 2 is due in 2026. We are going to donate our funds to a not-for-profit, and we're going to make sure RDA is listed on that not-for-profit list. So anyone can join my team, and I would love you all to come and invite others. It's easy to do, and Martina, I don't know here. You can't really easily do this. I will share the link to the Google Doc where you can add your name easily. Just one moment. We're working on a name for ourselves. And we're starting up meetings in order to do that. Here's the S index team roster and other scrappy information. So multidiscipline, bibliometrics, folks that make decisions on promotion and tenure within institutions, folks that care about data curators and data managers participating in receiving credit, folks that care about how a data set is valued, meaning not just citations, not just downloads, but impactful things, being fair, being shared, the more complex view of data. And what did Bruce Wilson say just a few minutes ago? People who, he said, if you're hunting for something in the room, don't just look under the light. It's not, don't take the, who was there that can help me with that? It's the harder part of doing the evaluation, the part where we know we still have infrastructure that we need to build. It was a bit of a metaphor. Okay, so that's really it. If you want to join that, you're welcome to do so. Martina, did I do an okay job on that?
Yes.
You're typing in the chat. Okay. All right. You can take down the slides and flip back over the chat conversation.
I just have one more slide, and that's more or less guiding our discussion now in the last 10 minutes. So how do we want to continue? I think the decision was made that we need to continue, and we decided to do it in a more open format in interest groups so that we are not pressured to do these 18-month products, but can do different discussions, because we have the more technical details that we have to figure out. We have the community engagement part. We have to include the publishers. So I think that's the way forward. We have to write a case statement. So maybe it's the point here to ask who wants to be engaged in that group actively. So you are, of course, all welcome to join passively, but is there anyone who really wants to be in the core group of writing the case statement, maybe become a chair of the group?
And we will, when we stand up that Google Doc to write the case statement, we'll invite everybody from the working group to do that. So you don't necessarily have to commit today, this very second. You'll have an opportunity to do that.
Not necessarily volunteering. I was just going to ask, how many people in the working group so far are like really technical people? Because I think that's going to need to be a key focus of an implementation interest group, is having people who are really like on the ground level in the weeds with how XML stuff is captured and delivered and how Crossref and others handle it. That's not me. But I think that's a voice that is really going to be needed.
So
I have some good ideas.
yeah, and technical, depending on each of those workflow actors. So yes, I think we will make sure we have coverage there. So yes, Kira, that is spot on.
Yeah, I think we are a bit short on the publisher and indexer side. I think from the repositories we have a good representation and have the connections to those colleagues who are doing the technical stuff, but it's really the part of the publishers' indexes which we miss out at the moment.
Yeah, I'm thinking of things like Scholix, which I think I mentioned in a comment in the chat, but all those things that I am vaguely aware help make all of the metadata work and make everything talk to each other. But I think that's a technical know-how you need.
Scholix might be the easiest to solve because you just have to talk to the OpenAir people and they will just iterate one step into those objects and just resolve them, though they have the direct link between the objects. So I think that's fine, but I think to get those publisher citation index makers to move forward, that's hard. And there are many of them.
I'm not super worried because we do have Coptas and we do have the recent paper.
Yeah, that's right. We have that.
Yeah, I'm not.
But are there also the citation index people in it in Codebase?
Yes. So in our working group.
Okay. Yeah.
So dissecting it a little bit, Martina, if you want to bring the workflow up, I can talk to each of the workflow actors. I'm not saying we have everyone. I'm just saying we have a good. So indexer wise, the folks from Web of Science have been participating. It will be time to go back to them and talk about implementation. And I think what will be a good technique is to do that with the SciEx folks who have agreed to go ahead and implement. So think of FOMO, fear of missing out. That FOMO is a really important thing within publishing. If you've got one person, Kira, you're going to be my FOMO. If you've got one person who says yes, and even it's like mom against dad, right? Like that works really well in publishing, mom against dad. So I will say Cambridge is doing it, and then ears will perk up, and then I will be able to move people forward. And
don't forget the people from Dimensions. I think they are also interesting.
Yep. We certainly will. So that'll be
okay. So
the indexer folks. DOI registry agency, so that's DataCite and Crossref, which really there's just the two, and they're both been part
PubMed Central?
They're an indexer. So
they're an indexer. I'm just thinking about possible indexer people So
As-
PubMed Central might be
Oh,
interesting.
just keep them in your prayers. So
Mm,
I heard they're losing people because of our government situation here. The
okay.
primary guy lives down the street from me, so I can at least go knock on the door. That's Jeffrey Beck.
Mm,
So as long as he's still there, I think we're okay. It's also important to do the Europe. What is it? EMBL?
EMBL.
Yeah, with Melissa Harrison. So that will be
Okay, yeah. But
um,
they are always cooperating to each other, and I think the European, yeah.
yes. So they have more reason to even cooperate with each other because of our situation. Jeff, interestingly, Jeff brought me an NIH use case. He's in on this, and he brought NIH with us. So that's really good for a US government person. So journal and publisher, I actually haven't spent a lot of time here for this group because I already had the group that wrote the paper on citations. So the key there, a couple keys. One of them is the publishing platform, folks. There's three major platforms. One is Literatum, who's part of Adapond. One is Highwire, and one is Silverchair. I just saw those folks last week at STM. So Wiley owns Adapon, so I have an in there, and if they do it, the other two will do it. So that's good. Literatum is the platform provider for most journals. So even if they're the only ones that do it, the FOMO will be really strong. Interestingly, Crossref has updated some stuff, so they need to implement new stuff anyway, so we can just kind of tag in on them. So that will be, I think, okay, and we'll pull CopDesk. CopDesk, even though it's the Coalition for Publishing Data in Earth and Space Sciences, the publishers are the same publishers for all the disciplines, so we have that leverage point. So that'll and we can pull them in. So, Kira, what I haven't dug in on yet is that book chapter reference in the paper. I don't have that piloted. So that might be an opportunity for us to partner and figure out how that piloting would look like. So complex citation object to child, to the element, to the linked digital object. That's the weakest piece that we have for having thought it through and what it looks like for implementing. And then the rest you all know about. We could use the generator situation, we have some leads on. It would be kind of neat for Zenodo to be a generic generator. So we have had early conversations with them. We've not brought them back in yet. Thinking that we'd want well, anyway, I'll leave it there. We have 3 minutes left. Okay. I'm just gonna stop. So thanks everybody for coming. And join us as we ride this one on the big wave.
Yeah.
I'm all about a good
So
metaphor.
we hope that you will join our interest group and keep engaged with us. So thanks from my side also, and see you in the next sessions. Yep. So bye and see you.
Thanks, everyone.
Martina, I have the chat saved, so I think we're good there. Joan, thank you so much. James, thank you for the DataCite riff. And everyone, Uwe, and hello everyone who has a chance to talk. Thank you for being here. Oh, and Nabucco-san, hello. Oh, it's so nice to see you.
Okay, we thank everyone in person.